On this episode of China Uncensored, so why is the Communist Party persecuting Falun Gong? Does anybody know? Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. So, before we get into why former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin started persecuting Falun Gong, the thing you need to understand is, alright, just kidding. I'm really going to talk about it this time. In the last episode, we learned that Jiang was in a not-so-great position in the late 90s. He was an unpopular leader both with other party members and the people, and because of his rather eccentric diplomatic behavior, he wasn't too popular with other world leaders either. And since Hu Jintao had already been long appointed as Jiang's replacement come the National People's Congress in 2002, it looked like all Jiang could do was run out the clock. You can see how he might have a little bit of an inferiority complex. But that's where Falun Gong got his attention. Now, as someone trying desperately to stay on top, why won't any of those other jerks just like him? It must have been frustrating to see how incredibly popular Falun Gong and its founder, Li Hongzhi, were becoming, seemingly without even trying. Li was invited to speak at government-sponsored events like this event hosted by the Ministry of Public Security. And after that event, the People's Public Security Daily wrote an article praising Li for his contributions in promoting the traditional crime-fighting virtues of the Chinese people, in safeguarding social order and security, and in promoting vicissitude in society. Come on, People's Public Security Daily! What about Jiang Zemin's contributions to safeguarding social order and security? Now, wouldn't it be great if Jiang could take Falun Gong down a peg while at the same time cementing his own power base in the party? Remember, Jiang rose to power by supporting the Tiananmen Square Massacre. He knew what kind of fears mass movements could inspire in the party, and he learned his lesson from that. So for the later half of the 90s, Jiang tried repeatedly to make Falun Gong seem like a threat. China has a history of rebellions being started by mystics and religious leaders, so if he could make Falun Gong look dangerous, he could convince the other party officials that they needed to fight the threat by beefing up the security apparatus, which he could then control. So Jiang could be the valiant savior of China. But Jiang's greatest enemy stood in his way: facts. Jiang launched a nationwide investigation into Falun Gong, trying to dig up something he could use against them. And since this is China after all, investigations usually involve tapping phone lines, spying on people, and raiding homes. No expense was spared. And the investigations, well, let's just say they didn't turn up anything. In 1997, China's Public Security Bureau launched an investigation to determine whether Falun Gong should be labeled a heretical organization. They determined no evidence has appeared thus far. In 1998, an investigation by the National Sports Commission of China concluded, "We're convinced the exercises and effects of Falun Gong are excellent. It has done an extraordinary amount to improve society's stability and ethics." An extremely influential retired general in the People's Liberation Army with impeccable party credentials, Li QIHUA, who said he began fighting the communist cause when he was 10, wrote an article saying China's leaders should look kindly on Falun Gong and that they should actually start practicing because it would improve their physical and mental health. And an investigation by Qiao Shi, chairman of the National People's Congress, third most powerful person in the Communist Party and biggest political rival of Jiang Zemin at the time, found Falun Gong has hundreds of benefits for the Chinese people and nation and does not a bit of harm. It's like these idiots have something against launching a baseless political campaign against harmless people. Don't worry though, that would actually be one of the last things Qiao Shi did as a public official. With the help of party elder Bo Yibo, father of Bo Xilai, you might want to remember that name, Jiang defeated Qiao Shi in a power struggle and forced him into retirement. So the investigations really weren't working out, but gosh darn it, that wouldn't stop Jiang Zemin from trying to discredit Falun Gong. In 1996, the Falun Gong books, which were bestsellers, were banned from official publication. In 1998, articles attacking Falun Gong started appearing in state-run media. Police began stopping people from exercising in parks and started searching people's homes. And on April 25, 1999, Jiang finally got what he was looking for. 10,000 Falun Gong practitioners assembled outside the Central Appeals Office right next to Zhongnanhai, the leadership compound of the Communist Party. They were petitioning in response to the arrest and beating of 45 practitioners in Tianjin the previous day. They lined up, appealed for official recognition and an end to escalating harassment, and hours later left as quickly and quietly as they came. It was the largest demonstration in Beijing since the 1989 Tiananmen protests. Jackpot! So what if then Premier RONGJI met with the Falun Gong practitioners and the issue was peacefully resolved? Jiang Zemin was there to stoke the flames. He argued that if they didn't act quickly, the party would lose control of China. Don't worry though, Jiang said he could wipe out Falun Gong, and in just 3 months. The only problem is, Jiang said, since there were 70 to 100 million Falun Gong practitioners, they had infiltrated all levels of the party, even the highest ranks of the military and security bureaus. So it would be necessary for him to create a security force that had unlimited power and existed outside the law and outside the control of any other government body and answered only to him or someone appointed by him. And that was how Jiang Zemin created the 610 office, named after the day it was created, June 10th, 1999, almost a decade to the day of the Tiananmen Massacre. And the 610 office sprang into action on July 20th. Journalist Ian Johnson, who won a Pulitzer Prize for his coverage of the Falun Gong crackdown, describes the purpose of the 610 office was to crush Falun Gong, no measure too excessive. Within days, a wave of arrests swept China. By the end of 1999, Falun Gong adherents were dying in custody. Now, giving this kind of unlimited power to Jiang Zemin, that didn't sound too appealing to the other 6 members of the Politburo Standing Committee, the highest echelon of power in China, especially Hu Jintao. But Jiang bought off Li Lanqing by making him the first head of the ultra-powerful 610 office. Li Peng didn't have too much of a problem because, well, he did push for the Tiananmen Square Massacre, so he didn't mind bloodshed, but also because Jiang had already made his protege, Luo Gan, the head of the Political and Legislative Affairs Committee, which controls all of China's internal security forces and, wink wink, was about to see major expansion, and promised him control of the 610 office after Li Lanqing stepped down. As for the other 3, they didn't really support the persecution. And funny thing, they didn't have careers after 2002. That was during the 16th National People's Congress. Not only did Jiang knock out his rivals, as the final kicker, he upped the number of standing committee members to 9, filling the extra spaces with his people. Man, Luo Gan really had a lot of power. Jiang Zemin had finally fixed the game. He was able to retire in 2002 and control things from behind the scenes, just as his predecessor Deng Xiaoping had done. And maybe now everyone will love him. So even though Hu Jintao officially became China's top leader that year, he and his premier Wen Jiabao had next to no power. That's why Jiang, technically retired, would always sit right next to Hu Jintao at important meetings and meet personally with important world leaders. Wow, look at those two. The political future that Deng Xiaoping had given Hu Jintao had been stolen by Jiang Zemin. That's how Hu went from this happy-go-lucky guy to Woodface, as some Chinese started calling him. Meanwhile, the 610 office, along with a number of police and secret police, kept growing in size and power. Officials were using eliminating Falun Gong as the main excuse to amass personal fortunes. The message was clear: if you want to move up in the Communist Party, help persecute Falun Gong. No one took that to heart quite like this guy, Zhou Yangkang. He used to be the party secretary of Sichuan province from 2001 to 2, but then he made a very important life decision. Some people, like his own son, think he had his first wife murdered. That way, he was able to marry Jiang Zemin's niece, and suddenly he went from an official in way out Sichuan to being hand-selected by Jiang as head of the Ministry of Public Security, even though he had no experience with police work. Then, in 2007, he got onto the Politburo Standing Committee and replaced Luo Gan, becoming the head of both the PLAC, that's the organization that controls all those police, secret police, paramilitary police, and pretty much the entire legal system, plus the 610 office. No one has ever made it into top party leadership by working for the security forces, until Zhou Yangkang. Zhou's grip on power grew massively by expanding China's labor camp system. At its peak, half of all those detained in China's labor camps were Falun Gong practitioners. Not only that, but for a few years, he was able to get a budget for China's internal security forces worth billions more than the army's budget. He also had a staff of 10 million, while there were only 2.5 million people in the army. But while Jiang and his allies used persecuting Falun Gong to glut their power, there was one tiny problem. Instead of being wiped out, Falun Gong grew and spread around the world. And one thing they seemed pretty fond of doing was exposing everything Jiang and his cronies were doing. Jiang's persecution of Falun Gong was becoming a huge liability and an international embarrassment for China. The end result was a political stalemate between Jiang's faction and Hu Jintao's, and that's why up until 2012, no significant political changes and decisions were made in China. The Communist Party was in deadlock. The very power that Jiang's side has gained through persecuting Falun Gong became the biggest weapon of their rivals, and it was all about to come crashing down.